All right, let's bring in Sky News host Steve Price and the Menzies Research Centre's Nick Cater. Welcome to you both. Look, Steve, we knew Trump was the front runner, but winning all 99 counties, which is what it looks like this result is going to be, is even stronger than expected. And his margin against DeSantis is said to be historically unprecedented.
Yeah, you can join the other three candidates together, can't you, Sharri? And they still don't come up with Donald Trump's number. And we've got to remember that back in 2016, in that Iowa pre-selection, Donald Trump lost. He did not win that caucus when he ended up being president of the United States. So it's extraordinary. I mean, Donald Trump is just someone who manages to hit the right marks for Middle America. I mean, he came out after the result was clear. And one of the first things he said was, one of the two things he said, when I win in 2024, we'll start drilling for oil again and I'll shut the border. And you saw Sky News reporter Annalise, who was in the cold old Iowa all day today. She was asking people who were voting there, what was the big issue? What was the big issue in Iowa? And the big issue was the border. They don't want the border to leak. They don't want millions of illegals flowing into America and affecting jobs and prices. And so Donald Trump has hit the mark yet again.
Nick, I thought his performance today, Trump's performance today, apart from a brief moment where he started speaking to his dead mother-in-law and he looked up at the sky, apart from that moment, it was the most reasonable, coherent, even friendly towards his rivals that he's been in a long time. Do you think he is feeling very confident that he could end up the next president? Perhaps more confident even than he felt ahead of 2016?
I think he's confident, all right, Sharri. You can see that on his face, in his manner, in his demeanour. You're right that it was possibly a more, dare I say, presidential performance than we've seen from him recently, and that's encouraging, and I think this is always the way, isn't it, that the closer you get to the actual election itself, the more presidential candidates become. I'd like to say this is just Iowa, because I really would like to see a serious debate and competition for the Republican leadership. I really think it's very important. It's a crucial moment in history. I have my personal doubts whether Trump is the right candidate, but that's me. Clearly, Americans, or at least Republican voters in this case, are overwhelmingly running with him, and I think the result in Iowa does point to other states and say, look, I think he's on track for a victory, barring unexpected circumstances.
Yeah. OK, we're going to cross live to Washington a bit later in the show with Adam Crichton, also going to get analysis from Paul Monk. But right now, let's have a look at some of the other top stories today. Big front page in the Australian newspaper. It's an embarrassment for the Albanese government yet again on the international stage. The Prime Minister has failed to fulfil his promise to triple the number of defence personnel that he said he'd send to help the crisis in the Red Sea. Instead, journalist Cameron Stewart reports that Australia's only role in supporting the US-led military strikes against the Houthi terrorists in Yemen has been one or two staff officers. I mean, and the Pentagon, he reports, says that they're non-operational roles. Steve, this is very embarrassing for the Prime Minister, and it seems we're increasingly out of step with America's effort to fight the terrorists in the Middle East.
And the PM looks really weak on this, Sharri. He did two media conferences today, one in Newcastle and one in northwestern Sydney. He was asked a couple of questions off the back of the major announcement, and he just doesn't want to talk about it. I mean, what a joke. We're going to triple the number of people that we have in an office in Bahrain sitting behind a computer. We've got 2 people. Tripling it is what? Another 8. I mean, it is just pathetic. We were asked to provide a warship, and we couldn't do it. And it now turns out that one of the reasons we can't provide the warship is we don't have enough sailors to put on the warship. I mean, our alliance with the United States, particularly at a time when the global conflicts are so dangerous, is so important that we should just be saying, OK, yes, we'll provide a warship. Where do you want it to go? What time do you want it to be there? And then you promise to triple the number of people who are going to go to Bahrain, and we're in the middle of January. And those other 8, 9, 10, however many it is, haven't even been able to get their passport out of their sock drawer, get on a plane and get there. It's ridiculous.
You mentioned Albanese trying to defend this today. Let's have a look at what he had to say.
We do have people there, and the release from the United States made that very clear. The joint release that we were involved and participated.
He always says, makes this very clear, when really nothing is clear at all, and it takes the Australian putting the story on the front page as an exclusive for us to even find out what's going on. But Nick Cater, I think the point here is that our ally, our greatest ally that we need, the United States, that we need for our protection, ultimately, you know, if they can't rely on us to send a warship, to send defence personnel, then how can we expect the US to be there for us?
We should have a warship on its way right now, Sharri. That is beyond doubt, and the Albanese government will stand condemned for having refused that, and to reduce the number of personnel, I think, is I'm just appalled by it, quite frankly. But look, you pointed out one very, very good reason why we need to be there, because America, our best ally, most important allies, asked us to be there. We need to be there for that reason. But there are two others that I can think of off the top of my head. You know, one, it's a very important sea lane, crucial to Australia, to our imports. If we cannot navigate that part of the world through the Red Sea, then it will have an enormous effect on our imports and exports and on prices, crucially, and inflation. But secondly, look, this is an axis of evil we're up against. It's not the Houthis. The Houthis are a proxy for Iran, and China and Russia and North Korea. And there is a global interest in countries like Australia standing up and putting all the force and might they can in the way of these people.
Now, Chris Bowen in the past, as we know, has dismissed nuclear energy completely. He calls it a fantasy wrapped in a delusion. But according to a poll, and we should say the poll is by the Minerals Council, but according to a poll in the Telegraph today, 69% of voters in Chris Bowen's own electorate are in favour of developing nuclear power. Similar figure, 67% support the removal of Australia's ban on nuclear energy. Steve, is this a sign that it's Chris Bowen who's actually wrapped in a delusion?
He's completely delusional. He was at the second media conference with Anthony Albanese today, and they were talking about installing solar panels on social housing, which might be a nice thing to do. But Chris Bowen then went on about, when the summer's as hot as the summer that we've had, then we need to be able to provide cooling for people who live in social housing. Well, I don't know that Chris Bowen, where he's been. I mean, we've had a summer where we've had rain and floods. I mean, Bowen is the least effective minister in the government, beyond probably Linda Burney, and he is just completely delusional about where we're going to go with these emission reductions. I mean, Australia is headed for targets that it won't get to, and we're not going to have the infrastructure in place to provide the power that we need. And so we need to be looking at nuclear. I've just come back from Japan, where they've got all their nuclear power plants turned back on largely after Fukushima all those years ago. Japan uses gas and nuclear because they don't have the natural resources we have. As a country, we're stupid if we don't use everything available to us as much as we possibly can.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to bring you some breaking news now. Backlash, as we know, has been growing over Penny Wong's refusal to visit the sites of the Hamas massacre. I spoke about it at length on the show last night. But she's in Jordan right now. She's just held a press conference. You won't be surprised, Nick Cater, she's announced an additional $21 million on top of the, I think it's $25 million that she's already given to Gaza. She's saying that this $21 million is going to be directed to the occupied Palestinian territories. Of course, nothing for Israel. No aid at all has gone to Israel. Nick Cater, what do you think about how she's handling this trip? It is clearly not a solidarity visit with Israel.
It's not, Sharri, and every time she opens her mouth, she shows that even more. She's not with Israel. The decision not to visit the site of those the October 7th pogroms is shocking, appalling, embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for Australia, and I'm embarrassed for my Israeli friends. So that in itself is bad enough. Sending aid money to Gaza right now, that is madness. That is absolutely bonkers. I mean, we already know that most of the aid money, if not all the aid money, that was sent before ended up in the hands of Hamas, and they used it for what they wanted to use it for, which was tunnels and missiles, not for helping people. I just think that it's time for her just to get with the plot on this one and realise what every decent liberal democracy around the world is doing, which is standing shoulder to shoulder with Israel. No ifs, no buts, Penny Wong. Just get with the plot.
Yeah, and by the way, Albanese had to defend this again today, and he did so by claiming that Canada's foreign minister didn't go to those sites of the massacre where Jews were slaughtered. But he failed to mention all of the other world leaders who did visit the massacre sites: David Cameron, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, Mike Pence, Boris Johnson, Scott Morrison, Simon Birmingham. So many other people took the time to go visit the site, which we know has been the most traumatic and the greatest loss of life for the Jewish people in a single day since World War II. All right, Nick Cater, Steve Price, so great to have you both with me tonight.